Welcome to Withdraw Consent. I'm Jack. This is Victor. Okay, let me tell you about, this is going to be a media analysis episode. And let me tell you about three different stories that are happening. One, there's protests all over the country about the genocide going on in Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Number two, there's a story about them uncovering mass graves in Gaza where they're allowed to go back to certain areas.
Okay.
And they're doing it in a scientific way with, like really exploring it. And number three, there's a story that fake news is covering story number one to cover up story number two. So they're over covering protests, right, about how bad the Palestinians are in order to cover for Israel and the mass graves. We don't know if any of that's true. But what I want to put to you is this. If you're a legitimate news channel, we are not. We don't cover day-to-day news. You don't come to us for hot information on Twitter. That's fine. We analyze stuff and look at it, right? But if you're watching other media sources, the order of importance of these stories should be number one, mass graves. Because we're funding.
Sure.
Number two is it true that people are fake news covering the protests and not the mass graves? And then number three, the protests, right?
Okay.
Nobody's died at a protest. So, okay. Basically, I just want to analyze a couple different news sources and just show you how wild it is. But first of all, the mass graves, right?
Okay.
They found at least three mass graves. One was in a southern area that I can't pronounce, and they had just pulled out of it recently when I told you that the military had went home, one of the divisions. And then somewhere in the north, they're near hospitals, right? And you got these mass graves. You got kids in them. Kids could have died from a bomb. You've got people with catheters in. Hospital patients could die from a bomb, right? But you have people who were tortured and executed. You have people who were buried alive, it looks like.
Wow.
And you have people who had their hands zip tied behind their back, were killed and thrown into the mass grave.
Wow.
And imagine the hubris that you don't nip the thing. Because if you got marks that show that you were previously tied, doesn't mean you were tied at the time of execution.
Right.
They just, okay. So the Israelis' position is, okay, those are mass graves, right? But they're only 3 or 4 months old, right? And that, basically, maybe October 6th or something, something right around there. The Hamas probably just mass killed a bunch of people at their hospitals and just buried them there, probably.
They're blaming.
Yeah, they didn't do it. They didn't do it.
Talk about hubris.
Yeah. Okay. So now maybe they're telling the truth, maybe they're not.
Okay.
Let's look at the IDF, okay?
Okay.
There was a story months and months ago, and it was at the biggest hospital. I forget the name of it. Everybody knows the name of it, and I forget it. And there was an explosion there. It was breaking news. Everybody was like, Israel shot a hospital, right? And then, no, you guys are jumping the gun. It was a Hamas rocket fired from somewhere else, not even fired from and it landed in the parking lot. No damage. We got video of it. That was a huge story. Now, fast forward to now, and every hospital in the country is destroyed. Every single hospital is gone. The story used to be, okay, look at these babies in incubators. They're just packed into these incubators. There's no power. They're running off the generator. There's no gasoline. They're running out of fuel. Apparently, Hamas has 15 million gallons of, the Israel story, 15 million gallons of petrol down in the tunnels somewhere, which sounds like a great idea. And they refuse to give it to the hospitals because they're bad, of course.
Oh, yeah.
And the babies are about to suffocate. Now you have a preemie. There's no incubator. There's no hospital. There's no power. There's nothing for you. That's where we're at now.
Okay.
Right? So you're asking me to believe it's a war crime, right? You cannot target certain infrastructure. It's all laid out. You can't do it. They've leveled everyone. Nobody cares. Which is why they're protesting.
Sure.
Ironically enough, right? And so you want me to believe that they didn't do the mass grave thing? Okay. So the mass grave story is legitimate. We should be looking at it. Is my point.
Okay.
Right? And then that validates the third point, which is are people covering it up, right? With the protests. So my opinion is if you're doing protests only and you're covering all the news stories in the world, but you're missing this one, then you are actually covering up the mass graves by covering protests.
But part of covering a protest is why are these people so upset? Right. Mass graves.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then there's so much anecdotal stuff going on, but there's this one girl, it's this terrible video, and they ask her, hey, what are you protesting? And she's like, well, it's Palestine, free Palestine. And they're like, well, what, why? And well, because I think the campus is doing something terrible to them or something. Do you know why we're here? To turn to the other one, right?
Oh, man.
That's fine.
Yeah.
But then they're like, this is every protester in this country. Okay, well, it's not. Because if they're wearing I forget the name of the headdress that the men wear.
Okay.
But there's a black and white checkered one, which is the Palestinian one specifically, as opposed to the red and white one, which is the Jordanian one. And people at the protests are wearing the black and white one. You know something about the region, we'll just say.
Okay.
You've been schooled a little bit, you know.
Someone told you this is what you need to wear, yeah.
Yeah, but like, you know, so you have some reason to. Anyways, whatever. But basically, so they have all these encampments that they've set up at Harvard, different places. Columbia was a big one. They overtook a building. There's all this stuff going on, right? But like, so here's how Tim Cast's IRL covered it. Okay? No mention of the mass graves on his IRL show ever.
Okay.
Right? And I don't watch all of his episodes, but you can listen to the very beginning and he'll tell you what the segments are going to be, the main stories they're going to cover, you know? And here's how he covered the protests. The protesters are trash because, number one, they all say, we are Hamas, which means you're trash. And number two, they think all Jews are Zionist pigs, so they're trash. That's how he covered it, right? Then he goes, prove it. First clip, right? Shows a lady standing completely by herself at a railing saying, we are Hamas. Just one lady, no second voices. So all the protesters in the country believe they are because of this anecdote, right? And then they showed another thing where there were protesters, and they were saying stuff like, stop genocide, don't murder babies, right? And a guy, a pig of sort, comes through with a big Israeli flag, right? And the guy said, hey, you're a Zionist pig, right? And then, so they think all protesters think that all Jews are Zionist pigs.
Gotcha.
Well, here's the deal, right? If I'm big on any country, right? And say America, and I have all these American flags at my house. Well, if America's genociding the people of Tunisia right now, so you're having to stop American genocide protests, that's not the time I'm going to come with my American flag. Right. I still love my country. I hate lots of the actions that they do politically. I still love my country, but that's not the time I'm going to be parading through your thing where I'm kind of like a genocidal pig, we'll say. Right?
Well, because, you are approving of the actions by associating yourself.
Right, and I love my country, but I don't approve of the actions. Right. And so that's why at that moment you don't show up with this. So the guy was kind of a pig, we'll say. You know?
Yeah.
But anyways, it's anecdotal because it was one person, you know?
Right.
And then it's like, there's this thing that happened, and okay, so PBD, I'm gonna go for, right? He did the same thing. Okay. He did no mass graves coverage.
Okay.
And I'm just so disgusted. I really enjoyed his show, except for Adam, the Jewish guy, who's absolutely terrible, you know? And now I can just barely stomach watching it at the least, because it's just so disgusting. So there was this story that happened, which was very important, and there's lots of bad things that are happening at the protests, different individual things. But there was this one situation, and it was at UCLA, and you got this peaceful protest, and they got their encampment, which means they're living there, you know, protesting 24 hours a day. And you got all these Israelis, Americans, right, show up and with their foreign flags, you know, with the devil symbol on it, you know, and they start beating the tar out of these protesters, and they're dragging them around the encampment. There's a grandma, you can't defend yourself, grandma. You know what I'm saying? Just beating them, and they're trying to fight back, but they're definitely in defensive formation with these things up, and these people are like trying to pull them out and this and that, right? Okay, BBD didn't cover that at all. That story didn't get there, right? He covered the story of at Columbia, I believe it was, they pulled down the American flag, put up a Palestinian flag. Terrible thing to do. Terrible humans. Yeah. You pull down the American flag, you run up the American flag with the Palestinian flag under it.
Yes.
That's, you know, because that's what you're going to respect, because otherwise you lose all optics, you know. The mayor, Eric Adams, came out and said, this is despicable. Yeah, you're right. Okay, so we covered that story, which you're welcome to cover. That's where I first heard about that story on PBD. Now you got to cover the other story, right?
Yeah, totally do.
So Tim Cass did cover the other story of the mutual battles. They weren't mutual battles. It was one side attacking a peaceful protest that's constitutionally protected, what they're doing, right? So these are people who hate America and the Constitution with these foreign flags, fighting these other people with foreign flags. Okay, whatever. Anyways, diversity, it's our strength, maybe. But nonetheless, the fundamental nature of the protesters is correct. Just stop genocide. Yeah. Because I don't work. And Tim does this thing where he's like, these people have Israel derangement syndrome, right? Because look at all these this is a huge talking point among pro-Israel people. Here's a list of all the wars going on in the world, right? Cool. How many are we funding? See, the only reason I care about Ukraine and Russia is because we're funding it. I don't want our money going to it.
Right.
Otherwise, I wouldn't know as many details about it as I do. And the same thing about Israel in this. And now apparently the same thing about funding Taiwan because we're doing that too. This is the reason why I care.
Sure.
But I also am generally against genocide.
Yeah, totally.
So, So what do you think? You think it's interesting, like analyzing the...
Yeah. The only comment I have really is you're talking about the mass graves and who's responsible. You remember that video right after the thing in October that it was on a Jewish news site, and it was the camera from a helicopter of them just mowing down civilians?
Yeah. It was the video and it played all the clips?
Yeah, just people just riding bikes and they're just all dead.
Yeah.
And I'm just...
Cars racing away.
Yeah, but some of them look like they were racing away. Others just look like people who were just out and about, just normal people just getting mowed down. And this was something that was on a Jewish site. I'm like, yeah, they're probably just mass murdering people and throwing them in a ditch. Like that's...
Yeah, that's funny. Okay. I that brings me to another story about how terrible Israel is, right? So they really need the hostages back. This is why they're doing this whole thing.
Okay.
But they don't care about the hostages the least bit. Right. Because when 3 of them escaped or were let go, they came out, SOS, shirts off, yelling in Hebrew, you know what I mean? And boom, gunned them down. Yep. All 3 of them gunned them down, right? Sure. I heard a guy defend that.
Oh, okay.
He said, okay, look, I've got a friend, paramilitary, IDF, right? Mm-hmm. And here's why they had to do that.
Okay.
Because those 3 hostages over there, they were trying to lure the IDF in. It was a psyop. They were trying to lure the IDF in and ambush and kill the IDF. So the best thing to do is kill the hostages. You're insane.
Right.
And this is an Israeli saying this with a straight face. Like,
right.
If I were the hostage, that's what I would expect too. You know what I mean? Like, it's obvious.
Right.
You couldn't say, come over here. You're safe. We'll cover you. Come over here, right? You see, they got no bombs strapped to them. No, shoot them.
But if all the Israelis thought that way, they wouldn't have been on the roof trying to signal for help. They'd be like, "Oh, our own people are just going to shoot us if we try to get help." You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. The naivete of those guys.
Right.
It's like the naivete of the World Aid workers calling like, we're under attack.
Right.
Yeah, we know. Which turn did you make?
Yeah.
We went to the left. Oh, got him. Left.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Or the same thing of the little Palestinian girl, she's in the car.
Oh, right.
And she's calling for the aid workers. The same thing with the ambulance drivers who were like, okay, IDF, we'll take the route.
Right.
You know what I mean? That tanks lined up, you know what I mean? Just to get that ambulance before they assassinate that little girl,
Right.
They definitely didn't do the...
Right. Definitely no mass graves.
Yeah, definitely no mass graves. This is they call it the most moral army in the world.
Who's calling them that?
Israel.
Oh.
And all Israel apologists, like Ben Shapiro will tell you, it's the most moral army in the world. Every time before they do a bombing, right, like an aircraft bombing target, they have to have a lawyer look at the bombing parameters to see if it's in violation of international law or not. And all of Gaza is just leveled. Right. There's just nothing but rubble. It's from satellite photos, it's changed colors and texture because it's just nothing.
Dang.
Except for Rafah in the south, but which is their bombing, so.
All right. Well, things are going good.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts on these people who don't cover everything? I got sick of it years ago.
Yeah.
And just if you're not covering all the things, then I'm just done, which means I just don't.
It's so hard
to find stuff from you, and I
don't. It's so hard to find somebody that covers all the things.
Right.
I'm put it in the comments because I only watched PBD because of a comment from Just a White Guy to You.
Okay.
And then they weren't terrible like this until very recently.
Okay.
With this whole Israel thing, and I enjoyed them.
What's those extreme events that bring out their bias and all that?
Funding, who funds them, or whatever.
Right. Who's on the show with them?
Who's on the show with them? Right.
Yeah, we'd love to hear if you have good people to listen to for like current events and commentary on just what's going on in the world. Yeah, that'd be great. Let us know below. We'll see you next time.